are critical towards the mobilization of investment and creation of the right economic environment for businesses to thrive. And about 51 of them altogether, the president has a right to enlarge or restrict them as he deems fit. Again, we also have the free trade zones. My colleague dwelled a lot on that. And like he said, entities operating within the free trade zones enjoy exemption from federal, state, and local taxes, as long as they are licensed and they are complying with all the terms of their license. Then they are exempt from payment of taxes. An initiative, which seems to promote investments and businesses in Nigeria is the National Single Window, which was recently launched about 2 years ago by the federal government. And that initiative is with all agencies that have one thing or the other to do with both import and export into the country. So these are some of the very major frameworks that we have in place to encourage investment and the economic development of Nigeria and northern Nigeria particularly. And then the second arm of your question is how the north, or not the northern region, can leverage on these frameworks and develop the region. And basically 2 ways. One, I think it's to create the enabling environment in terms of infrastructure, in terms of security, to be able to attract investment. Because like we said, you can have all these frameworks, but if there's a lot of insecurity in the region, nobody is bringing their capital. If you do not have airports, if you do not have roads or rails that will enhance movement of people and goods and services, nobody is coming. So that's the first thing that the North we need to do to be able to harness these opportunities. The second one is to take advantage of the existing frameworks. Having addressed the issue of infrastructure gap, is to then take advantage of the existing frameworks. Like again, my speaker, the last speaker said, we have a number of free trade zones in northern Nigeria. We have some in Kaduna, we have in Kano, we have in Jigawa, we have in the FCT, we have in Adamawa. But what's the business volume, especially from within the region in terms of investment in this area? So we need to create awareness for people to be able to understand that these incentives exist and that they can take advantage of them. Then, of course, the incentives I spoke to earlier, the economic development incentives, one of the 51 that are currently contained in the Nigerian Tax Act is in the area of agric and agro-processing sector, as well as manufacturing. The North naturally has an advantage in this area. And so these are some of the things that they need to do to harness the benefits that are contained in those frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bimpiva. Mr. Abdullah Alpha Mohammed, quickly, can you please tell the audience, is the AFTA a mirage? If not, how is the agreement beneficial to northern Nigeria?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. How can anyone even say that AFTA agreement is a mirage? Trade has begun. People have leveraged this AFTA agreement and trade has begun. The first trade that happened in 2024 was by Dangote. You imagine that Dangote will leverage before other smaller businesses. They see these opportunities. These people that have money, they see these opportunities even before the people that are upcoming. And that's why these kind of sessions are very, very important so that we expose people. Trade has begun. It is not a mirage any longer because trade has begun. And even with the trade beginning, there has been the establishment of the settlement system, Pan-African payment and settlement system, which before now, when trade began, you will have to get dollars to pay for goods of other people. For instance, if a Nigerian carries his goods from northern Nigeria to maybe Mali, the currencies are different. So you have to convert those currencies to dollars, and it will take about 6 days before you even get your money. So to eliminate those barriers, the AFTA protocol have actually established Pan-African payment and settlement system. It actually brings about everyone having their currencies, trading in their currencies, and you get your money as immediately as possible once trade has happened. Now, opportunities for northern Nigeria. I'm very fascinated with that. Number one of such opportunities is in agriculture. We have animals, we have grains, which we can actually export from Nigeria. Animals that you can take to other African countries and you actually get your money. Second one is mining. Our keynote speaker actually talked about insecurity and all of those things. And I was smiling when he said it. His keynote was succinctly delivered, as simple as possible, but he actually hit the point. When you look at it, this mining issue is the thing that is even causing insecurity in northern Nigeria. Now we have been talking about Sahel Corridor. Do people know what you will get from Sahel Corridor, the trading route of Sahel Corridor? Maybe you will remember that the federal government are trying to establish a rail between Nigeria and Niger and Chad, Mali and Chad. These things are actually tailored towards the northern Nigeria actually taking benefit. Now, the next one is the comatose industry that I will talk about, textile industry in Kano. The textile industry is actually dying. What do you get from textile industry? You get people making goods, shoes, bags, belts, and then you have them in Kano State trademark. How many people have even known what trademark is? Brands, branding, trademark, branding. Once you get those things done, you will find that some people will be like Johnston's and Murphy that we wear, like, Calvin Klein. You have those kind of things in Kano, and you can leverage on them. Then the last one that I will even talk about, amongst so many other benefits that will come to northern Nigeria, in intellectual property sector. For instance, the movie industry. The Kano would actually export their goods to all parts of Africa. The issues around copyright, we have after annexes on copyright and intellectual property. How many people? We have to know these things to be able to leverage on these opportunities. These opportunities are actually for northern Nigerians' use.
Thank you so much. Before I get to Aisha Abdullahi, Dr. Bebeji, sorry, I've just been asked to ask you two very important questions. So you're next now, please. Then I'll come back to Aisha. See, the audience wants to know, what are the key performance indicators that operators or managers in the free trade zone must meet to prevent revocation of license? And secondly, what dispute resolution mechanisms are available in the after to ensure that operators in the free trade zones maintain uninterrupted operations and business continuity during dispute resolution?
Yes, I thought you promised to take care of me. Now firing two questions at me successfully. That means we'll have some scores to settle after this. But quickly, actually, the idea of key performance indicators is not really a legal language. It's more or less a managerial language. So, but what does the law actually, what language does law use? The language actually use performance conditions. So in the agreement with the operators, there are actually key performance conditions that are inserted into every agreement, and those conditions will be followed strictly. Because like I said, the act itself is not just a dead law. It's a law that is meant to be living. It's a law that is meant to ensure that people actually mobilize resources and take advantage of these free trade zones. So that you don't, because we have cases where, for instance, people will obtain the licenses, approach state governments, secure land, and they refuse to even proceed from that point. And that is not the major, actually, reason why, the NEPSA itself is enacted. So first and foremost, I would say that the first performance law is that the authority actually has the power to revoke a license for non-performance. So once the authority understands that an operator is not actually living up to these conditions, then it reserves the right to actually take over the license. So just to keep it active. Now there is also another indicator. Yes, I think I will use performance indicators because we can relate to it. There is what we call timely development and operationalization. So this means that the operator must develop the zone within approved timelines. And he must actually commence operations at agreed. Should that operator actually fail to do that, then, of course, the authority has a power to revoke. Then also, there is also what we call minimum investment thresholds. Now, because of this kind of so much financial commitment, so there are thresholds. And those thresholds, capital thresholds, there are levels that are required. But they are not just required from the onset. They are also required to be maintained throughout. Actually, there must be actually a continuous capital flow so that that actually zone does not actually or the license remain dormant. Another key indicator is what we call export performance indicator. Now, of course, since the export is entitled to 100%, incentive, then the law requires that the export must be 100%. This means that an operator cannot take advantage of local markets while he's actually using the zone to enjoy tax incentives. Then he is now going around to sell those actually items or items processed to actually the local market. So another actually indicator is development within the zone. So when the zone is actually handed over, the zone is not just for the operator to go to sleep. Required to ensure that he constructs internal road networks. He must also ensure that there are actually power utilities that are installed, and then also to ensure that warehousing and logistics systems are also installed. Now, all this is so that the law is not just a dead law, but a living law, ensuring that the operator keeps active, that license that he's granted. And another indicator is the employment generation and local content. Now, under the law, every exploiter of this free trade zone is expected, no problem, is expected to ensure that he creates employment opportunities for Nigerians, especially within the locality. And not just that, he must also ensure that he facilitates actually skills transfers. Now, this of course aligns with also the national development goals and the Nigerian actually policy on local content. So, and then also, there's the general idea of regulatory compliance. We have already established that other institutions and other laws actually have a bearing in what actually the activities of the operators. So this means that there must be compliance with customs regulations. There must also be compliance with immigration laws. There must also be compliance with, environmental standards, not compliance with corporate governance, according to our corporate governance principles. Now, of course, with that also comes institutional oversight. The NEBSA generally has the power for institutional oversight, and the Customs Service, of course, because it rests solely on exports, has also the oversight powers, and also the Nigerian Revenue Service has oversight powers. Now, of course, it does not stop there. It also requires constant financial and operational reporting. It is not just enough for the operation to be there. It must be seen in content that a periodic actually report is submitted to NEBSA. Not just that periodic report. That report must disclose operational actually developments, must also disclose financial actually standards that have been complied with, and at the end of the day, export data. So I think I will just simply cut to the idea of dispute resolution or dispute settlement, because I have gone too far here. So under the ACFA, now we are going actually basically continental. Now, the question is specific on ACFA here. So, of course, dispute resolution mechanisms, as lawyers, we know. That is why over time, we have been moving away from the idea of litigation. We have seen clearly almost every legislation that is enacted to facilitate business has specific provisions that actually encourage out-of-court settlement of disputes. So ACFA is not different. Because of the level, of the nature of financial resources that will be required to actually settle disputes, that's why ACFA actually in Section 20, institutes that a state party can actually approach, and take advantage of the dispute settlement mechanism. But it must be noted at this point that it is only state to state. Private entities cannot take advantage of it. So this means if a private entrepreneur in Nigeria wants to take advantage of this dispute settlement, he has to go through the Nigerian government. And that also is a problem. Is an issue that perhaps we will discuss later. So the structure of dispute settlement is basically fashioned after WTO design, where settlement is encouraged, and then mediation and ultimately arbitration. So first and foremost, the first requirement is that there is what we call consultation stage. So parties are required to embark necessarily on consultation, try to settle the matter, via negotiation among themselves. Now, if that fails, but the good thing about this, and this squarely actually resting in the question, business does not stop. There is a requirement that the activities of the operators is required to continue flowing until the final determination. That is because nobody will want to, generally in commercial relations, we all know that we go into business so that we continue to exploit, the terms of this relationship until at the end of the day we cash out. So this has a tendency, if you submit to dispute, the dispute has a tendency of actually putting in abeyance whatever business that it is that you run. So in this dispute settlement mechanism process under ATFA, it requires that the business will continue to flow, will continue to run. And then if it fails at consultative phase, then you will move to panel proceedings. And then the panel, once the independent panel is constituted, then there is a time-bound adjudication. It's not an open-ended thing. It is required to last for a particular time. Now, of course, interestingly, unlike arbitration and other dispute settlement mechanisms, this system has what we call an appellate review. Now, the appellate review does not review facts, but of law. And the idea is to ensure that there is consistency in the application of the law. The idea is to create a precedent so that whoever it is that will approach this panel will understand that, yes, there is some level of predictability. This is the kind of justice I will get. And at the end of the day, after everything is said and done, as lawyers, we know that there has to be implementation. So this implementation of rulings will now take, actually, the state parties are obligated to implement these rulings against any of their citizens, whether corporate entities or individuals. So basically, the idea here is that the dispute settlement mechanism does not stop. The business does not stop. The dispute settlement mechanism here does not stop. But like I said, it also encourages parties to resort to arbitration. And so parties can insert, in their bilateral investment agreements, clauses that allow them to also explore other means of settlement of disputes. For instance, they can explore International Center for Settlement of Investment Dispute Arbitration. So you see, on that platform, it can now be, because the platform is for investment states, investor states. So it is another way around the fact that, an investor cannot approach the panel. Now, under ICSID arbitration, an investor can actually take a state party to the ICSID facility. So this also actually opens, and it doesn't even foreclose the idea of actually exploring even, justice mechanisms in local actually courts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bebeji. Moving away from dispute resolution, Aishadu Abdullahi, please can you tell the audience, I have two questions for you, but I want you to give one answer to both questions. What are the physical incentives available to investors in northern Nigeria? And also, how has the ACCI helped in reducing bureaucratic hurdles for the ease of doing business in northern Nigeria?
Thank you very much, moderator. I'm going to use the second question to answer the first question. Chambers of Commerce. I will start with Chambers of Commerce. What exactly does Chamber of Commerce do, or what does it mean? Your question is focused on ACCI, but I'm going to expand it a little bit. ACCI is Abuja Chamber of Commerce. We have Kaduna Chamber of Commerce too. In fact, we have what we call a coalition of northern chambers of commerce, which covers all, of course, the coalition of all the chambers of commerce under these northern states. The mandate of chambers is so different from Nigerian Bar Association. It's also an association for businesses, just like we have the Nigerian Bar Association as an association for lawyers. The mandate of commerce is to support and promote. So we're talking about policies and frameworks and laws and regulations on one hand. On the other hand, we are concerned about benefiting from the beautiful laws and policies and frameworks that we have. And of course, especially here in the North, with the statistics that our keynote speaker gave earlier that is deeply, deeply concerning, we know that part of our challenges is information gaps, access to the incentives, access to opportunities. And then we keep having these conversations of the need to bridge gaps, the need to create opportunities that would enable the beneficiaries to really benefit from it. So now, this is where the Chamber of Commerce comes in. And the Nigerian Bar Association section on business law. I think now more than ever, we need to partner. The SBL needs to partner with chambers of commerce, now more than ever. Essentially, when we have, on one hand, lawyers dealing with laws, dealing with regulators, and then we have businesses, business entities, especially here in the North. It was mentioned before, and I'll repeat it, that most of our businesses are really traditional in nature. The way we operate our businesses is usually local. So, chambers of commerce are there to support these businesses, to help them to build their capacity, to help them to build their capacity in terms of learning how to, of course, like I will keep referring to the keynote speaker because he took a lot of words out of my mouth. So we need to have the businesses learn how to improve the standards of their businesses, how to have basic registration and compliance measures that would enable them stand, especially the competition that they are bound to meet when this AFCFTA comes into implementation. The Chambers of Commerce, what it does, especially at the Abuja Chamber of Commerce, it serves as a critical intermediary between government and the organized private sector. It serves in such a way that, okay, over time it created 4 centers. The Policy Advocacy Center, which helps in engaging regulatory bodies on behalf of businesses to promote policies, to interrogate policies, especially where it observes the challenges on businesses of new policies. The Chambers of Commerce also created a trade center that helps in trade facilitation, documentation support, of course, to have the businesses able to register and get the proper licensing that would help them to upgrade and standardize their production or their businesses. It also has the Nigerian Chambers of Commerce Dispute Resolution Center. As you heard from Prof. Bebeji, the framework of dispute resolution. So the Chambers of Commerce is an option, actually, where as the AFTA policy is being worked on, the protocol on dispute resolution to enable individual businesses. So the option, there's a fallback option on Chambers of Commerce. The ACCI has positioned itself to associate with almost all chambers of commerce across the world, especially the regional chambers in Africa, to be able to come together to provide the service, especially the dispute resolution service, when the need comes in preparation to the implementation of the AFTA. Then, very importantly, we have what we call the Business Entrepreneurial Skills and Technology Training Center, which essentially helps to train SMEs to build their capacities, sector-specific, depending on, of course, the sector. It creates opportunities, training opportunities that would help these companies and businesses to grow. One very important activity that ACCI engages in, or indeed, I'm sure all the chambers of commerce, when COVID hit, it exposed a lot, especially the deficiencies that businesses had. There were opportunities given by the government, especially the Central Bank of Nigeria and other development partners, supports in form of grants, in form of loans. But of course, all these supports and incentives came with terms and conditions. The basic terms were for a company to be registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission. And we discovered that a lot of the companies, some of them had certificates that they presented, but they turned out to be fake. And upon deeper investigation, we found out that there were touts that were duping them. So the initiative that was created by the Chamber of Commerce is to create what I think my co-panelists mentioned something about one-stop shop. So we organize events in form of a one-stop shop setup where we invite, depending on the sector, for example, those in food production, food processing, the market women that have products like pepper or herbs and market products that they want to package, especially to enable them to be export ready. So we put them together in the same room just like this in workshops or trainings with the regulatory bodies specific to that sector. This enables them to access the regulators. It enables us, both the chamber, the business, and the regulators to avoid or do away with the bureaucratic bottlenecks and enable the businesses to access the services through the one-stop shop provided by the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce also often serves as guarantor where loans are concerned, but of course with terms and conditions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sorry, before we continue, our keynote speaker has one or two questions. One or two contribution to this particular important topic that we're discussing. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for organizing a linkage, because I've seen the linkage between cross-border trade, export processing zone, free trade zone, and African continental free trade zone. They are all related. I just want to add the comment that there is need for your organization, especially the SBL, to look at support for Nigerian businessmen. It will not be compulsory, but let it be advisory. What I observe is that almost all the people who are exporting raw materials, especially raw materials, because that's what we export more in the north, raw materials, halfway they have problems. There were periods when they complain about Nigerians 419ers, blah, blah, but now those who receive the goods have become double 419ers. When they start export halfway, they will say the product